conversation. So this is hosted by CAPACOA, and thank you so much, Frederick, for the invitation to collaborate. Frederick Julien is the Director of Research and Development at CAPACOA, and I am Bridget MacIntosh. I am your facilitator for today, and I am looking forward to having just as interactive a conversation as possible. And so just to give you a bit of an overview about CAPACOA, the Canadian Arts Presenting Association, and the Arts and Perspective series that they do. So CAPACOA serves the performing arts, touring, and presenting community through its commitment to integrate the performing arts into the lives of all Canadians. Specifically with this type of research, CAPACOA seeks to be a catalyst for innovation in the performing arts, and they engage and support many research projects that can generate new perspectives on the presentation of performing arts in Canada. This is just the tip of the iceberg, and there are so many more initiatives that they undertake. So if you're not already subscribed, I encourage you to register for their free all-access newsletter, and you can do that on their website at capacoa.ca. So today we'll be looking at a few data sets and trying to make it as interesting as possible, but we want to be able to engage with the different leaders, artists, arts presenters in the community to share the data, to gather your insights, and then to collect it afterwards in a follow-up article. So everything that we are talking about today, Frederick and I will compile it, and we will be publishing a summary that will be available on the CAPACOA website. And with Zoom and all of these chat boxes and other doohickeys, we are trying to experiment with being as interactive as possible. So do feel free to jump in and add any questions to the chat box at any point during the conversation. And I will do my best to facilitate between sharing the data and jumping in to answer the questions. Frederick will also be keeping an eye on that. We also want to encourage you to share any resources or thoughts or insights that you have. So again, you are the experts out in the field. You have many valuable experiences to share, and it's these type of online gatherings where we're hoping to be able to leverage it and share it. So one of the engagement tactics that we have here are polls. So we're going to be doing various polls as well throughout the presentation. So to get to know you guys a bit better, our first poll is to tell us about yourself. So I'll throw it over to Frederick there. You'll see a poll up on your screen. If you could just tell us who you primarily represent or identify as, it'll just give us a good sense of what's going on and who's in on the conversation. This is a good learning for me too, to see how it interacts. Here we go. Oh, excellent. Great. Thank you so much. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us. So let's dig into it, shall we? I'm just going to close this off and move on. Okay. So identifying social statistics that identify the social factors of arts participation. So as part of CAPACOA's ongoing research, we are interested in various studies and reports that provide data on the social factors that drive people to participate in seeing live performing arts. We wanted to dig a bit further into this and again, collaborate with all of you to gain your insights on specific statistics and some key data that we found interesting and just wanted to throw out and share with you. So we'll be going through a few studies and their highlights. And again, we'll be sure to share the full reports and summary with you afterwards so that you have it for reference. So again, we're going to go through a few studies that identify the social factors that drive arts attendance. So our first study here, I'll just move on, I can move over, is an ECOS Research and Associates poll. So this was done, it was a survey of the general public, and it was commissioned by CAPACOA as part of the value of presenting. So this was done in 2012. A bit of background about the particular study that this is associated with. The value of presenting is the accumulation of 2 years of intensive study and exploration designed to envision performing arts presenters' current and future roles within the performing arts ecosystem and in their communities and in their society at large. So this study was commissioned by CAPACOA in partnership with the regional and other presenting networks, and as well as an advisory committee of sector representatives. So the research and the consultation process was designed and undertaken by Strategic Moves in collaboration with ECO's research associates for quantitative surveying. And what I wanted to draw your attention to here, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get the tool working, but right here, the driver, the opportunity to socialize with friends and meet people. So in this particular poll, 44% of respondents identified this as one of the main benefits and drivers of attending the performing arts. I just want to clause out that these answers were prompted, meaning that when the respondents answered, they were given a selection of answers to choose from. And in this, 44% did identify the opportunity to socialize with friends and family and meeting people as a driver to attendance. I'll move on to our next slide here. So this is informally known as the AHA survey to those of you who partake in research and development initiatives. It's the access and availability survey that was conducted by the Embryonics Research Group. So this was prepared for the Department of Canadian Heritage and the Canada Council for the Arts. And again, no matter what, we are again seeing that 21% of the respondents identified spending time with friends or family as a motivator for attending the performing arts. In this case, though, these answers were not prompted. So respondents had like full access and full opportunity to articulate what was the most important to them. And again, along other things, the spending time with friends and family appear on this survey as a driver. I also wanted to point out that it was Canadians under 50 years of age that were more likely to say that they wanted to spend time with friends and family as a driver for attending the performing arts. Okay, so this is the Culture Track Canada report. So to keep all the reports in context, this is the main report that was generated last year, and the report we'll be talking about later on in this presentation is a supplementary analysis to this Culture Track Canada report. So this was done by CAPACOA and Nanos Research, and it was a study of the attitudes and behaviors of Canadian cultural consumers. And it was the first Culture Track study that was fielded in Canada, and it built on the long-running research initiative of CAPACOA, and they are a New York-based strategy, marketing, and design firm for the creative and cultural worlds. What's important to identify with the Culture Track Canada report is that it sets an important baseline for understanding the unique proclivities of Canada's cultural audiences and is a great benchmark for future research efforts because we can build upon the insights first uncovered here. And this report was commissioned by the Business for the Arts in Canada. And again, it's yet another report where we see that 59% identified that interacting with friends or family was an important driver for them attending the live performing arts. Yet another research initiative that supports the social factors and the desire to interact with friends and family when attending live performing arts is the Corporate Research and Associates focus group research. This is another initiative that was prepared for the Department of Canadian Heritage in 2018. So in this particular study, focus groups participants mentioned that having time with friends and family and social interactions is one of the main motivators for cultural participation. And one of the quotes in particular from this focus group is from one of the youth members, or the youth segment focus groups. They mentioned, quote, "I like going in a group, and it's rare that I will go alone. I like to share the moment with others." And I just want to take a second here because I did see my chat box popping up. Oh, and that's just Frederick giving a friendly note to take extensive notes. And yes, we will be providing notes afterwards. So moving on, what was interesting are some of the obstacles that were also uncovered in many different pieces of research. So through the previous slides, we've highlighted how social factors drive live performing arts attendance. And in terms of identifying obstacles to attending live performance, it's interesting to note studies such as this, where respondents identified not having someone to go with as a barrier to them attending. So you'll see that they're identifying here that friends or family are unable to attend. And there's a quote that it's not as much fun if I can't find someone else to go with. And this was the sentiment of someone who was in the focus group from the ethnocultural minority. They had explained that, you know, if I don't have anyone to go with, I'm not going to go. Similarly, in addition to this corporate research focus group, I talked about the Culture Track Canada report earlier. That's that important baseline research that was conducted in 2018. In that report, 19% of respondents said, I couldn't find anyone to go with, and that's a barrier for me attending. There was no one to go with, I didn't go. And this particular obstacle, it was reported by both occasional and frequent arts attendees. It's important, we'll talk a bit more about that later. And this obstacle appears to be inversely related to age. So it seemed that the younger you were, the more likely you were to report that not having friends or family to go with as an obstacle. And so we have like the Gen Z demographic, that would be your 18 to 19-year-olds. They were the most likely to respond and identify that as an obstacle to attending. Next up, we have the millennials and the Gen X segment who, you know, middle of the ground, you know, didn't saw that as a barrier, that they didn't have friends or family to go with them. And then when we have the boomers, that segment were the least likely to identify that as a barrier. So I will move on. So ultimately, when looking at both the obstacles and the statistics that we shared earlier, it seems that the story that we're hearing from all this is that live performance is fundamentally a social activity. People go because they see the social aspect of it. They're able to connect with friends and family. They don't go if they don't have friends or family to go with. So we wanted to put the question out to you. That's our first poll there. I don't know if Frederick, you're ready to go there. We just wanted to see if this was your experience. At performing arts venues, are the audiences that you see primarily groups of people? Are they solo attendees? Or is it a split of both? Interesting. Okay, great. So mostly groups of people and friends and family have been identified by you guys as a main driver. And I'm just curious, and feel free to share your thoughts in the chat box. Is there any particular attendance pattern from this segment? Is there a certain time of performance that they prefer? Are they going mostly on the weekends? Are they mostly attending during the week or at matinees? It's okay if you don't have an answer, just curious to see if anyone had anything to share before we moved on. And no worries if not. I'll give it a second. Okay, I don't see any chat now, so that's okay. We're gonna keep going on. Oh wait, here we go. Thanks. Weekends are not great. Thanks for posting your thoughts. Great. And again, just a technical note, if people are trying to figure out where the chat box is, you'll just want to go to the bottom of your screen. There should be the ability to pop open a toolbar, and chat being one of the options. Great. Excellent. Nice, okay. So keep those thoughts coming and we'll be sure to track them. So we've just gone through a bunch of different social factors, some obstacles. And so now we're gonna dig right into the diversity and drivers of arts attendance report. So this is brand new research. This was just released earlier this week, I believe. I know Frederick can confirm or deny the exact date, but it's
on Monday.
On Monday, huzzah. And so this report is a supplementary analysis of that Culture Track Canada data that I spoke about earlier. So this was completed by the Nanos Research Group for Canada's Performing Arts Alliance. So for those of you who aren't aware, that alliance is made up of the Aboriginal Curatorial Collective, the Canadian Dance Assembly, CAPACOA, the Deaf Disability and Mad Arts Alliance of Canada, the Fédération Culturelle Canada Français, Indigenous Performing Arts Alliance, Opera CA, Orchestras Canada, and the Professional Association of Canadian Theatres. So this report used the Culture Track Canada data set. So that is an online survey of 6,444 Canadians that was conducted in December of 2017, between December 2017 and January 2018. The report explores what's motivating arts attendance among different segments of the Canadian population and how these motivators influence frequency of attendance at classical music, popular music, musicals, opera, ballet, and theater, as well as art museums and galleries. So when Frederick and I were looking through all this, we dug deep into the data and, of course, found some interesting things. So as we were talking the other day, Frederick had mentioned to me that, yes, there are people for whom attending with friends and family members is an important social motivation, but these people aren't necessarily the ones who are attending live performance the most frequently. And also, yeah, there are people who won't attend if they can't find anyone to go with, but then there are others who do feel comfortable attending on their own, and those people tend to be frequent attendees, hence the conundrum. So let's dig into the data and see what story it tells. So the most important drivers of frequent performing arts attendance based on this report are feeling welcome, feeling like it gives life deeper meaning, having grown up participating in it, connecting to my community, and being able to go by myself. So we wanted to focus, for the purposes of trying to keep this conversation as focused as possible, on 3 leading motivators. So the first one is the sense of feeling welcome as a driver for frequent attendance at arts events. We looked a little bit deeper into which particular genres of performing arts were the most strongly affected by this motivator. And in that sense, we had the ballet. So again, this was a genre where the attendees who attended most often cited the sense of feeling welcome as a key driver for them attending, followed by classical music and the opera. Moving on to our next motivator, the sense of connecting to my community. The genres where this was the most popular or most strongly felt motivator was the opera and the ballet. And finally, the third motivator that we were interested in, which is totally opposite from what we're talking about before, the ability of being able to go by myself. And that's identified primarily in classical music, the opera, and the theater. So moving on, it's interesting that in the diversity and drivers of participation analysis, the whole idea of interacting with friends and family, it isn't strongly correlated with frequent arts attendance. We did go into the data, the segments or the demographics rather, that cited interacting with friends and family as being the most important to them were parents at 68%, females at 62%, and millennials/Gen Xers at 61%. So it's interesting going through all of this brand new research that digs deeper into all the culture track data, that this analysis of feeling welcome and feeling like it gives life a deeper meaning are amongst the most important drivers of frequent performing arts attendees. So it's interesting that in the full Culture Track Canada report, I know I'm jumping through a lot here, I'll try to guide you through, it's these factors that fared well below most of the other drivers that were listed before. And to kind of refresh you, we talked about this slide earlier, so this was the initial Culture Track Canada report. So you'll see that the most recent research we're seeing now for social factors that drive frequent arts attendance were that sense of feeling welcome, feeling like it gives life a deeper meaning, and being able to go by myself. But in that initial analysis in Culture Track, they are way down here at the bottom, and I'm trying to get my mouse to go there, which is like, oh, that's interesting. What's that all about? And we talked a bit with Nick Nanos just to kind of get a sense of why is that? Why is it appearing that way? And we were told that this is because this full Culture Track Canada report, it provided the motivators for all the respondents, regardless of how frequently they attended live performing arts. So, you know, even though having fun and being social is an almost universal reason to attend the arts performance, it doesn't explain why someone attends the arts more or less. So whereas feeling welcome may be an irrelevant motivator for someone who doesn't go to the arts as often, it matters a great deal to those attendees who come to the arts the most often. So, that's a lot of data for sure. So I just wanted to check in right now. I know I threw a lot of data at you, so before I dive into some other questions, just wanted to throw it out there. Does anyone have any other pressing comments or questions that they want to share in the chat box, and we can go and refer to those? And if not, no worries. We just have some interesting polls and some quick trivia about some of the statistics in the diversity in drivers report. So we'll just give it a second here. Let's move over to our slide. Oh, this is, let me see. Oh, that's our first poll. Thanks, Frederick. Okay, so
there we are.
Just jump into it. Okay, excellent. So this was some of the trivia. So we wanted to break further into those motivators. So the question says, connected to my community is a motivator, 46% of respondents. So we're just curious to see what your thoughts are on who is the most likely to feel motivated by the possibility of feeling, I think you wanted to have the sense of connecting to community there, Frederick, in the question?
Yes.
Yes, my bad too. Yes, that's okay. That's all right.
So connecting to community. So who does it matter most, according to you? Who do you believe will be the most motivated by this driver of attendance? We're just doing this for fun, for trivia. So just go with your best guess.
Yep.
So we'll call it an and. People are saying immigrants. So Bridget, what is the answer?
Interestingly enough, parents are the most strongly motivated at this. So they are at 55.7%, followed by allophones at 53.4%, and then millennials at 51.3%. And what Frederick and I were talking about with this stat, interestingly, francophones are much less likely to be motivated by a desire of connecting to their community, and that was only at 37.5%. So now, before we go into the next poll there, Frederick, I saw that someone had a question here, and it was from Dawn. Did the sample size cover other culture groups? And if that's something we can't answer now, certainly we can follow up with later, but do you have any initial thoughts on that?
So the total sample size was more than 6,000 Canadians. So it is a large enough sample size that it was possible for NANUS to segment the answers according to various demographic groups. So if you look into the full data set, the raw spreadsheet, you can explore the data according to ethnic origin, according to revenue, according to parental status, according to immigration status, according to a number of things. So yes, it can be broken down in a number of things. And as Louise points out, there is very interesting information on attendance and ethnic origin. And if you dig deeper in the findings, you find out that certain ethnic groups are way more likely than others to attend very specific disciplines. I have to mention, when you look, because I say when, because I'm presuming that you will, when you look into the diversity and drivers report, you will find out that we're only reporting on traditional artistic disciplines such as ballet and opera and theater. This is due to sample size limitations. So Culture Track goes way, way, way deeper into smaller and more niche genres. Like there's even information about contemporary dance, for example. However, because the sample size for this segment is smaller, it was not possible, unfortunately, to include them in the report. So I want to stress this because there's way more in the full report and in that supplementary report than what you can actually read.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Frederick. And going into our next poll, it actually connects to the question that Natalie Dewan has here about the motivator of being able to go by myself. Does that mean that people are saying that they actually want to go by themselves, or that they are likely to go more if they feel comfortable going alone? So I think we'll throw it out to everyone we'll throw the poll to everybody to see what they feel, which segment is most strongly motivated by the ability of being able to go by myself or alone. And then we can chat about Natalie's question. It's fascinating seeing all of the poll kind of scroll with the responses.
Yeah. So come on, go ahead. Give us your best guess.
Good. 14 out of 23.
So we're at 65% voted. So, okay, we're beyond 2/3. So we'll call it an end.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So in this case, it was the francophone population that actually was the most popular. And we threw in a bit of a trick question there. So we didn't have men on here listed at all. Every other category here listed the being able to go by myself as a motivator, but it was the francophone population at 56.8% that identified being able to go by myself as that's the strongest motivator for attending, followed by gender non-conforming, non-binary at 51.5%, then other gender identities at 50.5%. And then millennials and the earning under 50K per annum at 50.6 and 50.5 respectively. One thing I do want to point out with this particular poll, and connected to the whole idea of conundrums, that based on the data, millennials have identified that both interacting with friends and family and the ability to be able to go by myself as motivators to attend. So it really depends. They don't necessarily fit into any one strongly preferred motivator. They like going by themselves, and they like using it as an opportunity to go with friends and family. And then quickly going to Natalie's question, I actually don't know the answer to that. I would think it would be just they would want to be able to go alone. It is a motivator. I don't know if the report actually digs into why it would be a motivator, if it's because they feel comfortable or if they do feel welcomed. Do you have any insights on that, Frederick?
That's actually that's a question that we should throw back to every single participant in today's web conference. The way the questionnaire was designed is that people were asked to say whether each of these motivators, if they agreed that it was a strong motivator for them to attend. And so it was just presented to them as is, being able to go by myself. So different respondents may have understood this as meaning different things. So being able to go by myself could mean, for example, yes, I am comfortable going alone as a person, but it was actually being asked in reference to a specific art form that the respondent had said they were attending. So this would have placed the respondent in that particular setting. So being able to go by myself in this context may mean that I feel comfortable being in that place on my own. I feel comfortable maybe because I'm feeling welcome. It's very likely that feeling welcome and being able to go by myself go hand in hand. And being able to go by myself could also be due to the fact that I'm a frequent attendee, and I know that if I go there, I'm going to meet people that I know anyways. So it can mean a number of things, but it's very important to bear in mind that it's a strong motivator for frequent attendees, whereas the need the obstacle of having no one to go with was a modest obstacle, but more for the occasional attendees. So obviously there's something to the arts that is that makes it so attractive that people feel compelled to go regardless or not they have someone to go with. And Catherine points some of the motivators in the Arts and Heritage Access and Availability Survey, saying that So we found that to have fun and enjoy myself was the highest motivator. But for
Mhm.
Indigenous peoples, the highest one was to learn something new about their own community or other community. And learning something new was also a higher motivator for those who identify their own ethnicity as other than European or Canadian. So there are a number of motivators, and I guess when these motivators are strong enough, then people will go regardless of not they have someone to go with. But it begs the question: what do we do as arts organizations to perhaps make it even easier for people to feel comfortable being able to go by themselves?
Excellent. So, so you a good segue there, Frederic, in terms of feeling welcome. The last poll that we have to go through this data is the feeling welcome motivator. So I'll wait till you have that poll up, Frederic. And last but not least, it's a motivator for 53% of respondents. And which demographic do you think would have identified this as the strongest motivator for them to attend? Okay. 16 out of 22, 72%. Perfect. So immigrants at 56%. Actually, they're all fairly close, with parents being the strongest at 60%, but right underneath them, we have the allophone segment at 59%, and then immigrants and other gender and identities at 58%. So what we were really interested in with this particular motivator is that feeling welcome is a motivator for recent immigrants who happen to be frequent performing arts attendees. And if we go back to the Culture Track 2018 report, the data in that report mentions that it's recent immigrants who tend to attend less as the years go by, and that their children also attend the live performing arts less as years go on. So we thought it was an important stat, and we thought, okay, let's tease that out a bit more. So keeping that in mind, I wanted to pose our first question to the group. How can we ensure that immigrants feel welcome and that immigrants continue to attend regularly? I'm throwing this out there almost as a proactive question for the sector to think about. So to help you answer this question, think about an arts event that or experience where you were made to feel welcome. What was it that made you feel that way? And feel free to share those thoughts as well. So, yeah, great. Okay. Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that, Carla. And again, anyone? Yeah. Thanks for the feedback. It's an experiment, so we're trying to make sure everyone has a voice and that we can capture the data. Excellent. Yeah.
So Louise, creating
Yeah.
a feeling of family with all attendees. Interesting. Volunteers, performers. Ties in well with the theme of the earlier Culture Days webinar on arts and belonging.
Mm-hmm.
Immigrants agencies group free attendance.
Yeah.
Good point, Victoria. This is something that I've seen various experiments of this kind happening, sometimes as one-offs and sometimes as more organized programs. Definitely worth trying it out. Some of you may be aware of the Culture Access Pass program at the Institute for Canadian Citizenship. It's a great program to invite immigrants to experience the arts and culture in Canada. One of the perhaps downfalls of it is that it becomes accessible to you once you have your Canadian citizenship. And sometimes for immigrants, it can take up to 10 or 20 years for them to have their citizenship. So what do we do between the time of their arrival in Canada and the time of their citizenship? So indeed, these kinds of programs that type into settlement organization to reach out to immigrants can be a good way to achieve this.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm just reading the comments here. Yeah, understanding the communities that you're reaching out to and encouraging to come to your performances is a huge thing. You know, just not blindly using the same advertising tactics for one group as you would another. It's really about building trust and relationships with those communities and ways you can do that. Okay. So we can keep adding there. I think just to move on and being cognizant of time, and of course we can always come back to any of these questions. So moving on to a different data set. So we've talked about all this new research. Let me move the screen over here. That didn't work. We talked about all this research in terms of the live performing arts attendance and participation and what drives them. We thought it was important to also provide some general statistics on the Canadian population. And this would be the population that the live performing arts sector operates within. So just two studies to share with you there. Again, some house problems. And the first one is the concept of Canadians living alone. So this was from the Insights on Canadian Society. Their Living Alone in Canada report, and it was published by Stats Canada in 2016. And that more and more Canadians are living alone. And it was in 2016 for the first time that one-person households became the most common type of household in Canada, surpassing couples with children. So one-person households accounted for 28% of all households in 2016, representing 4 million Canadians. And further, most people who live alone, they previously had a partner or had at least one child. So almost 3/4, 72%, of people living alone aged 20 and older had previously lived as part of a married or common law couple. And over half of of those respondents had at least one child. So among solo dwellers who had a dependent age child from a previous union, 59% indicated that their child lived with them for some period over time in a previous year. So it's interesting as we look at whatever various factors, marriage breakdowns or what have you, no matter what, we do find in this day and age that more and more Canadians are living alone. The next statistic that I wanted to share was that we are experiencing an aging population. And this is from the Government of Canada Action for Seniors report in 2014. Seniors in Canada are a rapidly growing segment of the population and are living longer and healthier lives than in previous generations. In 2014, over 6 million Canadians were aged 65 or older, representing 15.6% of Canada's population. And by 2030, and that's less than 2 decades, like 10, 11 years from now, seniors will number over 9.5 million and will make up 23% of the Canadian population. So keeping those statistics in mind, we have another poll that we wanted to discuss. So we identified that going alone was identified as a motivator for attending live performance. So considering that and the recent population stats, could it be that going alone is just an early attendance trend and that more and more Canadians will attend alone in the coming years? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And I don't know if you've got the poll ready there, Frederic, or not, or are we just going to... Oh, and Frederic, you are muted for some reason.
Sorry, I was typing.
No worries. No worries. Oh, you were muting it to type it. Okay, there we go. Excellent. So do you agree that going alone is just an early attendance trend and that more and more Canadians will attend alone in coming years? And while this poll's going on, I'm scrolling this. Okay, some would agree. Okay, excellent. So then moving on to just, let me move this down. So then just moving to a more open-ended question. So how can our sector respond and adapt to this trend? I'm just going to take a second here to look at some of the questions that have come up. If you can keep adding your thoughts, how our sector can respond and adapt to this trend. And I do agree here, Kyla had mentioned that older folks living alone are precious and have a lot of art and to share. It's interesting that there are, I think in that same seniors report that I had cited, it talks about many different grants that companies can take advantage of to help involve seniors in their organization. So whether it's maybe a type of volunteer or other role, again, I'm going off the top of my head, but it's just looking at what resources and opportunities are out there to include seniors in our arts organizations. So let's see here. And there was a question here, the research, so the diversity and drivers of arts attendance report, this was done by Nanos Research. These are great ideas. Please keep them coming. I'm just catching up on all the conversation here. So. Oh, interesting. I see. So Don, you mentioned that we offer free live streaming and create live performances in elder care facilities and schools. I think that's great as well. It goes back to that idea of reaching out to the community and actually working in situ with those groups and building that trust and awareness. I think, you know, as the population does get older, making them feel welcomed, perhaps even adjusting performance times. I don't know if anybody here on the webinar has experimented with moving away from your standard sort of 8 p.m. curtain time or 2 p.m. matinee, and looking at other ways that maybe they can differentiate performance times to respond to sector needs. If anyone has any insights to share on that. Yeah, the idea of getting the word out to retirement homes. Yeah. And that, okay, and I see, yeah, matinees being more and more popular.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, the whole idea of, you know, maybe even, you know, having your breakfast, getting, you know, having a nice afternoon at the theater, and then, you know, not having to worry about being, you know, home late or worrying about transportation or any kind of bus schedule or anything like that.
And interestingly, as I was doing my research for the tourism brief and reading about tourism trends, including business tourism and tourism by millennials, it looks as though millennials are way more likely than any other generation to travel alone. So there is a growing trend of people who will actually decide that they will travel on their own, follow their own rhythm, their own schedule. So yeah, it's possible that in the future we may see more and more people attending the live performing arts on their own.
Interesting. And going back to the idea of feeling welcome and making it easier for people to go alone and what have you. I was chatting with Frederick about an article that was published today in Now Magazine, and Now Magazine is a weekly like arts magazine published in Toronto, and there's a whole series about the price of tickets. So if you go online now, toronto.com, it talks about how, you know, now in this day and age, Broadway musicals, they used to be about $100 a ticket, or ticket prices at most would be that much. But with the, the success of musicals such as Hamilton or Come From Away, that ticket price has since skyrocketed and has really set a trend for producers to basically price their tickets as much as the market will bear, just your classic supply and demand type of argument. And I think it's interesting that John Karastamatis, he's the director of marketing for Mirvish Productions, he had cited that, there comes a point where even though that's what the market would bear and supply and demand, you can't, distance yourself from your community. Producers have an obligation to have people feel welcome no matter what their financial ability is. So again, maybe in terms of ticket prices and looking at ways to offer that up as a means of feeling welcome. So.
And I see Victoria making a note about social media artists and volunteer opportunities. Volunteer programs are actually a great way to invite people to engage with your arts organization in different fashions, in different ways, and a great method of also creating a sense of belonging and attachment. Definitely a good idea.
Excellent. And are there any other arts organizations that our attendees are aware of, or how can arts organizations create exciting social experiences that can also be attended by people who may not have anyone to go with? I'm going to type that in really quickly. How can arts should have had this like copy and pasted and ready to go, but Oh, and interesting. So Victoria, you said you tried a singles night at the NAC, but it didn't really work. I thought, yeah, that's something I would have thought. Yeah.
Victoria, if you can turn on your mic and perhaps tell us more about that and why it didn't work. Did you learn any lessons from that?
That's a great question. Thanks. Now, this is a number of years ago that we did this, and it seemed like such an obvious thing that, there's all these younger people and we want a way to people to kind of socialize and connect. And the first year that we did it, it sort of worked. And I think what happened is that if you didn't, like, were you coming to see the show or were you coming to meet somebody? And I think you may not have felt that you had enough meet somebody time, so we had like this cocktail networking thing before the show, and then you could come and talk about it after, the show thing. And that's what we thought would work. And after a while we thought, you know what, there's just not enough people signing up. They said, and we did survey them, and it was like, I didn't really meet anybody. I want to do my own thing. I'm not sure. And I have to be honest with you, didn't necessarily get all the answers, and I have to triple check from the marketing department because it's been a number of years. But it was something that seemed like it would make sense, and yet didn't. I think it was that question of, are you going to meet somebody, or are you just wanting a social outing? And if it's a straight social outing, like the NAC continues to do pre-show chats, a lot of those very popular. You might talk to the person sitting beside you. It certainly is a welcoming thing. Pre-show chats and meeting artists and post-show chats are always really good, welcoming kind of feeling part of it. But that whole singles night thing, no, it ended up being a bust.
And I wonder about, go ahead, Bridget.
Oh, no, go ahead. No, go ahead. No, I'll let you finish that because I have an idea to play on that or build on that.
Well, then go ahead. Keep on building.
Well, the idea of whether you're going for social interaction or whatnot, I know many performing arts venues, they have, their concession stand or, during the actual show, they'll sell coffee, tea, wine, beer. Have any of our respondents here, attendees here, or is anyone aware of a theater performing arts venue that tried to open up that shop, at other hours as a kind of community hub. I think like the theater center, for example, they have a cafe that not only provides refreshments and concessions during performance times, but they actually have operating hours so that people who live nearby or members of the community can come in and have a cup of coffee to help build that relationship between the people living nearby and the theater itself. So I'm wondering if anyone has any thoughts on that. It's great though. There's lots of conversation going on. Thank you for sharing this, everybody. Oh, and Louise, you bring up a good point. So regular concert event goers have to reach out to the person beside you, strike up a conversation. So Frederick and I were talking about, at box office, for example, when you do have assigned seating, do most box office personnel tend to book single ticket users in an area of the theater by themselves? Or if they have gaps in between larger groups, do they just try to fill the gaps in? Just again, curious as a ticket assignment process, if there's any, popular method of doing that. So. And icebreaker activities. I think it's funny, I've been to a few relaxed performances and I quite enjoyed them. I mean, I didn't find it too distracting. I think just having, and for those of us, I'm sure everyone is aware, but don't want to assume a relaxed performance is just one where the house lights are not fully dimmed to black. They're on quite low, and attendees are encouraged to get up and come and go as they please. Primarily, it's an accessibility accommodation to make the performing arts environment more welcoming to people with disabilities who may need either a timeout or just space to be able to best enjoy the experience. But I found it, for myself, just a more communal experience. I think being able to see the performance on stage as well as see the people watching the show certainly felt like more of a shared experience to me, in my humble opinion. I'd be curious too, Frederick, do you know if anyone has sort of done any stats on relaxed performances or how popular or that they may be, anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of. The practice has been growing up, has been becoming almost a mainstream practice, but I don't know that it's been researched. That's a good question.
Yeah, little flag for future. So I know we have about 5 minutes left. I'm just curious to hear some more from our attendees. Is there anything from this presentation that stands out for you? Anything that you were surprised by? Anything that any new hypotheses that you can make about this data and how it impacts arts attendance? I'm just keeping an eye. No worries if not. I know it's always trying. Okay. I'm trying to process everything Kyla is saying. There's some interesting stuff in there for sure. So thank you, Kyla. Okay, Victoria, still concerned about low levels of attendance by younger folk. Interesting.
Actually, Victoria, what's really interesting is that sometimes there may be a perception that younger Canadians are not attending as much as older Canadians, but actually statistics are saying the contrary. We have to bear in mind that the baby boomers were a very large generation. They still represent a large proportion of the total population. So it's normal that we see more boomers in venues, and it's normal that we see older people in venues because the population is aging. However, every single audience research suggests that millennials have way higher attendance rates in terms of the proportion of millennials attending than boomers do. So, I mean, there will be this world that we live in is changing, and eventually we may see more millennials attending, and actually they may be around. It just could be that they're less visible because they don't have white hair. I don't know. But it's also possible that millennials may be attending different kinds of activities that aren't necessarily the same ones that are attended by older Canadians.
Mm-hmm. And Louise, sorry, just to jump in, I see that she made a point here about making it all easy. So buying tickets, where's parking, where are washrooms, handicap entrances. These are all, like, you would think, like basic 101s, but it's so important to make sure that our websites are up to date and that information is there. And what's also interesting, that whole idea of feeling welcome, it's such an important motivator. And Frederic and I were talking about how, what are ways that people can feel welcome. And for the most part, attendees' first interaction with the theater is with their box office or their front of house staff. So, keeping in mind, as maybe venue operators or producers, what are we doing as a sector to train those frontline workers or retain those frontline workers and make sure that they have the skills and the tools needed to amplify that experience of feeling welcomed, and that they are well informed and are aware of everything that the production is about and what the theater can offer and what have you. So just again jumping in to take a look at the questions. We have just a few more minutes, and I guess just to finish, is there anything that that you, the attendees, intend to act upon based on what you've heard today? Anything, any new approaches or anything different that you'll start to do? I'm just keeping a look here. It's a good conversation. Thanks for making use of the chat box, guys.
Yeah, and Eva was pointing the ticketing platform, the online ticketing platforms. Definitely, we do have a problem with the fact that ticketing platforms are a real turnoff indeed, and they create a bad user experience from the very beginning of it. And I don't know how, as a sector, we can address this. We need to get all ticketing companies in a room and just tell them how we feel about the nature of this component of the experience.
Absolutely. So I see we have about a minute left, so I think I'm just gonna start to close it off here. And again, we will be gathering all of the information that's shared here and all of the resources, and we will be writing a summary report that will be published on the CAPACOA website. Again, encourage you to sign up and get the all access newsletter. So yeah, just wanted to thank you all for your time. I know it's a busy time of year, and we really appreciate you joining us today. And I wanted to thank Frederic again. He is you do a yeoman's task in terms of all the data analysis and research that you do. And I personally wanted to thank you for all your good work at CAPACOA and really digging through the numbers to find some interesting stories and facts. So yeah, and thanks to CAPACOA. And again, the Twitter handle there and the Facebook page are both there for you to check out afterwards. So yeah. So thank you again, everybody, and look forward to future arts and presenting webinars. Frederic, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add as we close it out.
No. I especially wanted to thank you, Bridget, for having accepted to jump in the bandwagon and explore these findings with me and then eventually with us. And thank you all for being together, for having joined us today, because these data points, they're highlighting important challenges for the sector, and I can't find the answers on my own, and I'm really relying for people working in the sector to come up with new insights that can help us advance together.
Great. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I'm just gonna leave it at that. Take care.
Thank you all.